Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be taking a look at a fantasy wargame / card game from Signum Games as I check out Warseer, the Legends of Signum 2. Okay folks, so what do you get then? When you start Warseer, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. First and foremost is the big core set. Now the core set is actually made up of 3 boxes. You can essentially build your own starter set. Each one will contain this core box, which contains, if I flip it over, everything you need to get started into Warseer. So it has the gaming mat, your player mats, all the tokens, dice and cards and terrain that's contained for the main game itself. And then you can also pick up 2 faction boxes, and we'll talk about those in a minute. The game itself is designed to be played in about 60 minutes. Can be played faster or slightly longer, and you can play solo up to 4 players on 1 mat as well. So let's take a look at what you get inside. First off, you get a player aid / quick reference. So this contains all of the explanation of the turn sequence, including how the various attacks, dice, ranged attacks work. It also has, I don't know if this will be visible here, a little description on the dice, because it does use a set of bespoke dice. Alongside that, they're color-coded, but they've also got symbols on them. So if you are colorblind, or if you have difficulty in distinguishing the differences between them, then you can see very quickly. In this attack example, it uses 2 yellow dice, but it also has the 2 spots on it, so you can work those out, which is really handy. On the back, it has the description of the various card decks that you'll be using, as well as the character cards for the hero, champions and minions, and a glossary of terms. So a interesting little cheat sheet. You get the Rulebook, which is an A5 rulebook, spiral bound. Take a look at that in a moment. We have a set of tokens, which are double-sided, used for a variety of in-game effects. We have a little set of quick reference cards. So we have, again, this card shows things like what a hero, character, minion, their symbols, armor tokens, that sort of thing. And then again, there's dice. Symbols are on there as well. So you get 2 of those with the basic attributes as well on the back. So 1 for each player. Turn order if you're playing solo mode, and then your standard turn order. And then a set of scenario cards for setup. So we get 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of those. Some will be for 2 players and some will be for more than 2 players. So you've got your scenario set up there, and then the map set up on the back. They are all in the book as well, it has to be said. You have your mat. So if I just get this out, satin finish mat. So you may be able to see there a rather autumnal feel. Some little bits and pieces on the mat. These are just there as features, shall we say. Decorative features. They're not gameplay. There are actual hex tiles you put down that will affect things like moving, and it is double-sided. So forest on one side and a sort of a stepped plane in a different period. The mats themselves are 9 wide, 7 deep at the widest point, and they are, I believe, 3-inch hexes across the longest point on them as well. So that's your playing surface. More than sufficient for any games you're going to be playing, and they'll fit neatly onto a table. Inside then we have some of our card decks, terrain features, cubes, and other accoutrements. So let's get these out and we'll take a look at them in a bit more detail in a moment. And you're not finished yet. If I lift this, underneath we have our main play decks, our hex terrain, and our playing mats. So let's take a look in more detail. Okay, so we're going to start off with the rulebook. It is, I think, A5, landscape rather than portrait, and it is spiral bound. So it sits nice and flat, which is handy if you're going to be referring to it during a game. It starts off, we have introduction, game basics and modes, components, game zones, types of cards, the dice and income, game setup, turn phases, activation, victory conditions, extra modes, scenarios, and glossary. So there's a lot packed into 88 pages. We have the introduction about Signum and then your game modes. So the majority of people will be playing a 1v1, which is your standard sort of duel. You can play a 4-player game, which is a grand melee. Essentially, everybody's attacking everybody else, or you can play in teams. There's a bit about tournaments and solo mode, and then your skirmish as well, which is more of a fast play combat based, which takes a lighter touch for some of the other features of the game. The game itself, you build up your city, and then the city has buildings within that will grant you extra bonuses in the game. So there's a certain amount of management there, how you spend your funds every turn and the like. Has a lot of tactical depth and strategy in. However, if you just want to play a quick skirmish, then you can do that. It takes a lot of that sort of core components and gameplay out and allows you just to get to duking it out on the table instead. When you're playing, you can see here we have the battle deck, which contains your spells, relics, buildings, and tactic cards. You've got a smaller feat deck. You've got your terrain hexes and cards, and then your player tablets, player mats, the battlefield, and then your dice, and of course, miniatures. Inside this, we also have scenario cards, which we've seen, the solo mode feat deck, improvements, so sort of campaign system, and then full cards for playing solo as well. I skip past the intricacies of gameplay. You can see here when you're playing, you've set up your player tablet with your victory points tracking along the bottom, the hero's power is tracked at the top, along with your income. And then we have your battle deck and the history, the ancestral hall. So when people go into there, all is not lost. If a character or champion or whatever goes into that, you actually get funds back, depending on how big they are. They can also sometimes be renewed from there as well. So character types, you've got 8 cards. Heroes, characters, minions, relic spells, tactics, buildings, terrain, and unique terrain. Some of which will require more interaction than others. When you come to play, the main component of your force is your hero, and the hero will then determine what else you can bring to the fight. So along the top here, there's a number of color-coded stars, and they refer to the champion's level. So if you've got somebody who has 4 yellow, 4 blue, and 2 red, then that's the maximums of those ranks that they can bring when you're putting your other sort of forces together. They have them as bronze, silver, and gold. You still also have a cost to pay as well for some things. So overall, the rules are well laid out. This is the second edition, but then it had a sort of a prototype version before this final version has come out. So they've been working on it for a while. Main changes between first edition and the Warseer of today is the removal of measuring tapes and the like. Instead, everything's played on that hex map, so it plays much faster and removes the necessity of having to be a bit finicky, I suppose. When you're playing with the cards and everything else, you don't want to be starting to slow gameplay down to measure centimeters or millimeters difference to see how things go. So finishes off with the scenarios, whether it's 2-player or 3-player or 4-player. They're marked up the top, along with where you're going to be placing any specific terrain tiles, or if you have the unique terrain, which are again played from your deck as a sort of a spell. They will go into very specific places, but it's up to you when you're playing them. Then we have our glossary at the end, where it explains some of the core mechanics, again, things that you may be looking for, along with an FAQ. So a nice quick reference at the back once more. And yeah, a really attractive rulebook. And there's a lot to be said about a nice, concise rulebook. They are worth their weight in gold. The player tablets are neoprene, and as you can see, about the same size as the rulebook themselves. You have a room for the main deck, goes in here, and then space at the side for your hero, along with their upgrades, and your city to this side. You can track your victory points and then your income and power up here. And then you have sort of a discard on this side, although that's where the, as they call it, the history goes. So as champions come and go, wax and wane, they end up there. The card deck itself, the main one that contains the likes of your magic, your buildings, your tactics, all of that good stuff. So destroying a opponent's relic by rusting it down, for example, a nice spell there. Or your tavern to build up your city. And as it says, pay 1 crown, and to tap your champion gains +1 movement until the end of their turn. So a little speed buff for getting home for a pint. The cards are standard playing card size, and they're nicely finished. Again, satin finish, nice selection of artwork across them, all of them, which is very nice to see. Big deck of cards, a lot of which are, I wouldn't say surplus to requirement, but when you come to build your hero and you build your force for the game, you'll be putting in a specific amount of those depending on the size of game you're playing. We also have some smaller card decks. So these are mini sizes. About half the size. I believe they're European mini cards, and that may seem like I'm splitting hairs, but there's about 1.5 millimeters difference between US and European mini cards. And if you're going to be sleeving your cards, that's important. But as you can see, the feats deck contains things like Big Army. So play this card if you have at least 2 more champions than each of your other opponents. Or Giant Slayer. Play this card when you've at least eliminated a creature which had 4 or more health. And when you've discarded it, you gain either 1 minion, 2 crowns, or a card. So these are used for some of the game mechanics, game types. Every turn, you'll get the opportunity to draw, I think, 1 of these, or 1 from your main tactics deck. And then sometimes you can get extra ones off the back of them. The green deck, which is about twice the size. These contain your upgrades or improvements for both your city or your characters. So as you can see, you can have an arena in there, playing around with the city hall, or there's a set of golden boots for one of your champions or heroes. So a nice, easily identifiable way of checking who's got what and how well they're doing currently. Speaking of minions, there's a nice set of what I believe are clay chips, like poker chips. Red on one side, blue on the other. These are to identify your minions. They're summonable chaff, essentially. You can bring in multiples in some turns and then they'll die very quickly. So it's a nice set of tokens. Signum Games do a set of actual minion miniatures for a lot of the factions. So if you wanted to upgrade and actually have some miniatures on the table, you can do that. But otherwise, these are more than good enough and a nice heft to them, which I appreciate. We also have our dice. So as before, they are bespoke. When you're rolling, you'll be told what colours to roll, with the exception of our D6 there that has the Signum dragon on one side. The rest of them are sort of combat dice, so you'll get things like pushbacks with that fist, or the Signum dragon is a crit, or a single sword blade is a success. So when you're rolling, you'll have a value that you're looking to reach. Certain things will trigger, so critical effects potentially, or pushbacks, at which point you can use your results to deal damage and relocate your target into a more advantageous hex for you to deal with next time. Speaking of hexes, there is a set of 22 smartly coloured terrain hexes. They are double-sided as well, so plenty of forests, some unique ones that will give you in-game effects, like a citadel. On the reverse is a river, some sort of runic well or gate. They're all nicely printed, 2mm cardstock, plenty of variations there for you to set up, not just the 10 scenarios that are in the book, but if you want to start sort of setting up your own games with your friends, there's plenty of opportunity in there with the terrain hexes to build different battlefields each time. And like I say, there's also a card deck as well. So these are just a little aid memoir for you if you're playing, to tell you things like the special rules attached to the catacombs or the spire, the altar or the camp, whether or not you're using the ancient teleport or the spherical portal. And even then, just your generic terrain types, so hills, block line of sight, creatures on top of a hill ignore 1 pushback in attack rolls and damaging abilities from other creatures. So you can just set these out at the side of the table depending on the terrain that you have on your map. You're not going to use them all, so it might just be 1 or 2 of those sitting to the side so that you can quickly reference the special rules for them. There's also a couple of little rectangular fords, so bridges on one side or just a ford on the other, just to cut across those rivers and give you access points, or bridges if you need to have a bridge head. So that's the core rules and the core box, essentially all the components that you will need for playing out your games. The other things then are your factions. I've got a couple here. You might be able to see some of the miniatures down front, but essentially when you're getting a faction, you get a box with the miniatures and then some specific cards for them. So I've got here the Wolfen-Corsairs of Hansa, and just to show you what you get inside it, you get another one of those quick reference sheets that we've seen in the core box, and then you get 3 sets of cards. Okay, so card-wise then, like the main core game, you get your turn order, including the solo mode and standard game, and then the quick reference cards if you want for symbol type, die type, and then your basic attributes. So what will happen when you do X, Y, or Z in game. On top of that, you get a pre-constructed deck for the specific faction. So if I bring this in, you will see there are a specified number of various card types, majority being one. Some of them do double up in some of the sets, but these are not necessarily unique, but pre-built sideboards for the miniatures within the actual faction box. So if we have things like our gargoyle there, which is a minion type, or we have a bounty for the head, so something you can play as a tactic in game. In doing so, when you eliminate an opponent's champion, you get an additional victory point beyond what you would normally get. These are often not just flavorful, but integral into the play style of the faction. So you'll find certain cards may appear more often for certain types. And by that I mean, if you're picking up, say for example, the Styx Undead Empire, this is one of 3 undead sets currently. So there's the Baronies, the Undead Empire, and a vampire set that all come within the overarching undead. But each set is unique to itself. They have different miniatures within them, and they have a different build with the cards that go with it. So you may find something a bit more specific to your playstyle, or you might just want to go based on the models within it as well. If we take a look then at our cards, this is our big hero. So the main, I suppose, captain, Bastian Rackham, the Grey Howl. We have things like the different ranks of champion that they can bring in. So maximum of 6 bronze, 2 gold, and 2 silver. Their special abilities or passive abilities, some of which you may need to buy in or upgrade, and then their core stats. On the back, it also tells you some of the cards that they'll be getting feat-wise. And then he is accompanied by a selection of champions. So you can see we have werewolves across the board. And this set is actually all werewolves. If I bring them in, here's the captain himself. So the game plays with 30mm figures, but the size of the faction box can vary. So when I was talking about the vampires for the Styx before, it actually contains, I think, 4 figures, whereas the others will maybe contain 6 or 7, depending on the sort of power level you're looking at. Like the captain here, he's got his compass, and he's got his little monkey on his shoulder instead of a parrot, out with a delightful little spyglass. So even though they're 30mm, these are much bigger, sort of closer to 50, 55mm, depending on size. And they come as a 3D printed resin. They are cleaned up. You'll see some of them may have some marks where they've been sort of lightly sanded. I haven't seen any missed supports yet, which is nice. I hate having to go hunting for supports. There's no build instructions with it, so you will need to dry fit these. But what I will say is you're probably best getting everything out at one go. I normally don't suggest this, but I did notice when I was looking at the Styx that a couple of pieces had been bagged incorrectly. So there were a lance arm was in the wrong bag for one of the cavalry types. It just means that you may want to go through, dry fit, check everything's right, and then potentially check to make sure it's not been put somewhere else before you cause any issues. The figures themselves are absolutely gorgeous though. And even though there is no build instructions, they went together very quickly. Because let's face it, in most cases, an arm is an arm, and you know whether or not the left arm or right arm, depending on thumb. Shockingly, very few pieces for some of these models. So this one, for example, the entire upper torso was one piece bar this front hand. And then the legs just had to be glued on to the base, and then that whole torso went on top. Head, everything else was already there, including pipe. So the resins themselves are absolutely gorgeous. It's also interesting the way they've decided to do it, because the faction boxes, you can pick those up at any stage, either to get yourself a new warband, or maybe if somebody's already playing, then you can join in. So having the extra quick reference sheets in there, having the cards, mean that if you're playing and your friends want to get involved, they don't need to buy a whole force themselves, the starter or a core box themselves. The starter sets contain enough in there to get them up and running. We can see here some of the sticks figures as well. They come either on 40mm rounds or 30mm for some of the infantry. And the detail on the figures is absolutely exquisite. Like I say, I've not done any cleanup on these, so they've just been put together as is. But really nice, chunky detail throughout. Which means if you're a painter, you can have a lot of fun. I know they're big fans of non-metallic metal at Signum. But if you're not a painter, things like dry brushing and contrasts will pick up really nicely on these. So you can get your force onto the table in short order. But yeah, that is the Legends of Signum 2 Warseer. Interesting game. I've played it with Shay previously whenever they were just going through the sort of the prototyping phase. So if you want to see how it plays out, you'll be able to have a look back on the channel and see us playing some of the early versions of it. It's been tidied up a little bit since then, and overall I have to say I'm very impressed with how they've set out the core set and the sheer number of faction boxes that are already available. Like I say, 14 factions, and then within each of those factions there can be multiple boxes available, so you can have a real disparate look throughout the guilds, for example, and decide whether or not you want to be rocking some plague doctors or a band of engineers. Let me know what you think below, folks. Until next time, bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.